Okay, thanks everyone for joining in. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Sapan Talwar. I have been given the duty of being a moderator today with the esteemed panelists with me. I am a cybersecurity advisor. I have worked with multiple companies as CISO's in CISO role. And today we are going to spend some time on this topic. I hope everyone can read it because it doesn't seem complex to everyone. Raise your hand, like if you think this is easily understandable. No one is raising it. It is easily understandable, that means? Okay, that's positive for us then. It will be easy for all of us to make sure we share our thoughts, and those thoughts are directly getting into your brain and you are able to get the best out of the session. So the intent is that we speak about our own expertise areas related to this session, and we get to understand your perspective as well. So feel free to ask any questions. We'll try our best to provide the best answer, and if we are not able to, then apologies in advance. The point remains that we should learn from each other eventually and gain something out of these 40 minutes we have in our hands, right? So with that, I'll get started and maybe request the panelists to introduce one by one themselves. Thank you.
Sure. Thanks, Sapam. Abhishek Mitra, I am the Director for Information Security in PepsiCo. I lead the information security team within India as well as lead information security for PepsiCo's AMISA sector, which is Africa, Middle East and South Asia. So happy to be here and have some good discussions today. Priyanka.
Yeah, hi. My name is Priyanka Sharma. I head technology laws for the Aditya Birla Group. I am a lawyer in a room full of technologists, but I think a perspective of, I bring a perspective of risk and regulatory requirements to an ever-evolving field of cybersecurity. So that's about me.
Hello, good afternoon, everybody. This is Shaleen Khetrapal, and I represent BSS Rajdhani Power. It's a power distribution company in Delhi, and we are supplying powers to western and southern part of the Delhi. And I'm heading the cybersecurity division of BSS. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. So we have a very diverse panel, right? We have someone from BSES, who we all need every day and any day, in some ways or the other. And we have from PepsiCo, I'm sure we all drink in some ways or other some product, right? And then lawyers are running the country in some ways. So I hope you got best of what you expect from this session. Straight away getting into the topic, right? So topic is supply chain domino effects. Right. I think I'll just start by saying that it is about what could be a cascading impact of any disruption caused due to cyber incident and or a natural issue, right? I'll put that in perspective before we start that session, because all these discussion we are going to have specifically will point towards cyber security related threats and impact, which can possibly cause a supply chain effect and eventually be a domino impact to the related chain. So that's the context, so that I make it clear and make sure that everyone is thinking in that direction as we get along to hear what our panelists have to say on this subject, right? Any questions anyone has before we get started? I'll keep asking. Okay, so anyone can give an example of a supply chain issue which probably caused a major disruption in past 20, 30, 40 years. Anyone? Sorry? Okay, that's a good one.
Solar winds.
Very nice. Solar winds. Good that we are getting answers from the technology guys. So any more examples? So I'm just calling out these examples so that in case still if people have doubt about what's the topic, everyone understands what's the topic, right? So that's the perspective. Any which ways, I think, thank you for example. So we'll straight away get into the first pointer which is in my mind is, do we think that a cyber attack can be a catalyst to an extent to cause a supply chain domino impact, right? Because we always keep talking about cyber threats and how they are impacting our environment, including exploiting of vulnerabilities or different other kind of attacks. So do you think it can be a catalyst which could further dwell into a domino impact on the larger supply chain?
Of course, I mean, we heard quite a few examples, right? We heard about SolarWinds. Kaseya is another one that happened some time back. Log4j, we were hearing about that. So all of these instances, there's an incident that's happening at a third party. And now we have our extended enterprise, right? There's most enterprises that we are looking at this point of time. A large part of their functionality is happening outside the walls of the enterprise. The walls does not exist anymore, right? And then whenever we are seeing these kind of incidents happening, we saw for Kaseya, affected whole bunch of organizations across the world. So there's definitely a domino effect from a supply chain perspective. And the supply chains are not linear at this point of time, right? We depend on our third parties. Third parties are depending on their fourth parties, fifth parties. And one impact on one particular area has a ripple effect throughout the organizations. So if we talk about really large impact events, most of them are actually recently we are thinking about are happening at the supply chain level. It's starting from there and then cascading around the world. So maybe Priyanka, for two.
If you look at the impact that a cyber threat would have on the supply chain, definitely a business operational impact is one thing. We've seen Applied Materials had an incident at their supplier's end, which reportedly caused losses which went up to $250 million for that quarter itself. And if you can imagine, it's a very high demand industry, and the kind of ripple effect that must have had on their clients as well. Now this opens up a lot of other issues as well, litigation and contractual compliances, etc. So it's not just the impact of the incident itself, but it is also the loss of opportunity, the loss of business, your reputational damage, everything that happens along with it.
Hello. Power is something that is the most important and is considered as the critical infrastructure. We cannot even think of anything even if the light goes off. So this conference would come to a halt. So I'm not sure how many of you have seen there was a Northern Grid failure in 2011 and 12, wherein the entire half of the country went out, including the PMO house was out of power. Still, it is not known whether it was a supply chain attack or maybe it was a cyber attack or which part of the attack or maybe some internal failure. So considering the real-time analysis and the real-time data, and I think supply chain is something that is very vast, very diverse, and includes a lot of elements into it, and is very vulnerable and very complex in nature. So maybe bringing everything together and managing it is a very challenging in a power distribution, manufacturing, or maybe any other sector.
Thank you. And I think we also, I think just to add to what you mentioned, all three of you, I think there is huge impact which is unseen as well, right? Because something which is directly seen as a business impact, there is an indirect impact. We have a loss of visibility of where to start looking at. What, like you mentioned, that it could be one of the three kind of attacks. Similarly, getting the data around how we start acting on that and working around it itself a difficult task. So we might think that we may be able to contain it, but I think another big challenge is what all and up to what extent we can learn from those attacks. And so I feel that it is about seeing everything in totality rather than in silos. That's a very important aspect. And coming from there, and I'll stay with you, Shaleen. What do you think, and how do you think a secure architecture or a similar kind of design can help us define a more resilient environment where we can lower the impact of any such disruption or any such supply chain attack?
So broadly speaking, for any effective supply chain management should have at least 5 to 6 elements. Number one, I would start with the skilled people. You should have right people, skilled people, trained people to do the right job. Number two is use of right technology. When I say right technology, I mean you should have right kind of solutions to manage, which can provide you real-time data and take right time action on it. Third is know your assets, know your inventory. We should know what is the percentage of legacy assets, what is how vulnerable is your product, and what is the shelf life of the product, how soon we are going to change it, what is the patch management for that. Number 4 is having an effective relationship, a very good relationship with the supplier, with the vendor. It should have a very good contract management, a good SLA, quarterly, periodic meetings, how soon, or maybe, just in time. There are many things which have come up from the manufacturing side, just in time, and many other models which have come up, so that just to meet the SLAs. And last but not the least, I would say there is one thing is called as contingency management. So an effective supply cannot run without a good contingency management, where we should have a good backup, DR, or a redundancy in place.
Sure, thank you. Thank you for touching the key points. Abhishek, you want to take it from here, more from the architecture standpoint, maybe touching a bit about certain kind of solutions?
So, if I think about supply chain attacks, right? Each of the solutions have to depend on the type of attacks. And when we see supply chain attacks, there are different type of impacts. On one hand, you have your third party who gets affected, and it's not directly an impact on your, directly an attack on your organization, but on a key supplier. And we saw Toyota, for example, right? Their plans stopped for an entire day. They had JIT, but their plans stopped for an entire day because one of their suppliers, key suppliers, got affected. Architecturally, there's only so much you can do in that kind of scenario. Yes, what you probably need to have is, if it allows for it, a business continuity plan, which can bring things up in the right way, maybe alternate suppliers, redundancy, or you can have, for example, inventory, so that you can manage it. So in our industry, in PepsiCo, of course, we are a manufacturing organization. So we have to think about these, some of the scenarios from a supplier perspective. Then there's another area which is data breaches. Now, our data in our supply environment can get breached at any point of time. Now, in that case, again, architecturally, little controls, you can probably have contractual controls which can affect it. You can look at your third-party environment and see what kind of controls they have. Do they have an incident response process? Can they provide us the information in time so that we can act on it, manage the fallout? But a lot of it is contractual commitments. Then the third part of it comes more closer to our organization, right? At that point of time, we see that, okay, think about a supply chain attack where a third party gets affected with a malware or ransomware that propagates to our environment. In that case, at least, one of the key things that we need to have as an organization, especially global organizations, spread out organizations, have that challenges. They need to know what are their connectivity to different vendors that they have, third parties they have, customers, partners, etc. And from a security operations center perspective, network perspective, they need to be able to disconnect that environment very quickly. If it takes time, things will come in. Then need to have contractual commitments with the vendors to provide information around incidents, provide IOCs, because at the end of the day, when you hear about an incident at your third party, you should be able to do a threat hunting in your own environment to see are you affected or not. So that information needs to come back from them. So that's probably the third part of it. And then the biggest part of it that we talk about all the time when we talk about AISS, and where you have a third-party software which is affected. I mean, their patch gets affected or that software gets affected. You are utilizing that in your environment, and then how do you manage that? So testing becomes a very important part. Zero trust becomes a very important part. Segmenting your environment so that the fallout is limited. These are not attacks that you can get away without any effect in your organizations. But yes, if you have the right architecture in place, if you have zero trust in place, then yes, you can manage the fallout to a certain extent. So these quite a few things. Supply chain is, I mean, it's very, very complicated, and then the type of different effect it has on your organization again. And I'm talking more from a CPG manufacturing kind of industry. Again, there are different industries will have different impact on about it.
Sure. Thank you. So I think one more pointer which I think should be helpful, specifically in the areas where IT and OT operate together. There has to be clear segregation in terms of how they are architecturally designed and placed. I think that is very important, because in past it has been seen, and I think it's a learning, that any one part getting impacted can impact the other side, right? So until we have the right set of controls and mechanisms to stop the attack right there, I think we can, until then that isn't case, then we are actually exposing anything and everything, which means direct production impact in case even one single system in IT is ransomware, for example. So that is another piece which should be taken care when we talk about or set an architecture for an environment which has both IT and OT, so that it cannot impact each other. Over to you. We are talking about technology, but from the risk perspective and from the law perspective, the legality side of it, how do you see this area emerging as, or reducing the risk overall in case there is an attack or something of that sort?
So firstly, I think it is very important to identify the risk that you have. How important is this supply chain component for you? All your spend on security, your focus on security, everything will depend on what is the risk that you attribute to this component in your supply chain. Another very good thing that I think Abhishek also mentioned is about contracts. Now contracts are only one way of passing on liability. So it's one way of passing on liability and making your vendors, accountable. But also, if you look at the laws, the way today's laws are being written, all the responsibility for compliance with the law rests with the primary organization. So if you have vendors, you are responsible for their compliance. Now you look at RBI. RBI has a requirement where financial institutions are responsible for the security of their vendors, the third parties that they engage. Similarly, you see the new or the not so new Digital Personal Data Protection Act. That also says that the ultimate responsibility of compliance is with the fiduciary. So it is very important for you to have robust mechanisms in place to identify third-party risks, to ensure that do you have some form of audit mechanism, or are you doing security assessments of your vendors on a periodic basis. All of this counts into the way regulators are going to view you when you have a breach. See, nothing is foolproof. There is always a chance that there could be a breach in your supply chain. But other than the impact that it may have on your operations, which you try to counter through your continuity planning and other such processes, there is one big risk of regulatory impact, compliance impact, where you may be hit with huge penalties. Your organization may see a lot of penalties being enforced on them. Here, it is very important to have those processes in place, because you've seen regulators also look at, organizations kindly who have had these processes. They've done due diligence. So we did 1, 2, 3, 4, we did all of this, and it still happened. So that is also a factor that plays into minimizing the risk that your organization faces in case of such incidents in your supply chain.
Thank you, Priyanka. So all three of you spoke about third parties, four parties. So specifically, Shalini, if I may ask you, some kind of due diligence and what is the key areas you are targeting when you are trying to deal with third parties and fourth parties, specifically trying to ensure that whatever kind of access they have or the kind of data they possess from the core enterprise are safe?
So, in order to manage the suppliers, I would, take on four aspects. One is the regulatory and the statutory requirement. So, MOP and CEA, Central Electricity Authority, they both have come together with a cybersecurity regulations for power sector. So, I strongly believe that regulatory and statutory compliances bring everybody, all, whether it's a company or it's a supplier, they bring everything under one umbrella. So whatever products, solutions they are supplying, which is affecting the supply or the distribution of any organization, comes under a single purview and they have to follow those rules. That is one aspect. Number two is know your product. So the another thing which certain has come up is bill of software materials. So whenever you're purchasing any, and that is applicable to all solution vendors who are supplying to government agencies and critical sectors. So whenever you're purchasing or developing an application or a solution from a third party or maybe internally, it is very important to keep a software bill of materials. What are the application, what are the softwares used in developing that application, how well they are patched, what is the version used, so that tomorrow it would help you to manage the vulnerabilities. Third aspect is developing a contingency. So whenever you're designing a system, a new system, one is that you have to know about your legacy system. What percentage of legacy is that, and how soon what is the plan to overcome that? And whenever you're coming up with a new system, how you can manage the contingency is very important. So the planning part of to manage the contingency and having a DR is very important in that. And last but not the least, I would say that one should do a periodic review of the risk assessment. Keep doing the risk assessment at every periodic, whether it is in operations or in project. Both should be done in a separate manner, and whenever a project has been handed over to operations, the risk, I would say, the register should be also be handed over, or there should be a database maintained for the risk, so that the maybe the other project and teams can take a benefit out of it.
Thank you, Shalini. Thank you so much. You want to build upon it, Abhishek, in terms of what specific practices in your organizations are followed to do effective due diligence on the third-party supply chain?
Sure. So, most of the points that Shan covered is spot on from a third-party risk perspective. Probably one of the things that I would add is one of the key things that we would look for when we are looking at a third party is whether the security program is actually structured or is it ad hoc. Every company will get hacked at some point of time. Let's understand that, right? But what we would like to understand is that how will they respond at the point of time? Will they know about it? Do they have the capability to understand that they have been hacked? There was, I think, one famous saying is that every company has been hacked. Some know about it, some do not. So the same thing. It's like, so a third party, if they're getting hacked, will they have the process to understand it? Will they have the process to address it? Do you have an incident response process? And then what kind of relationships do we have to ensure that that information comes to us so that we can take corresponding actions at our point of view? So that's another thing. Now, of course, there are a few things that are happening nowadays. We have organizations which provide us predictive scoring about our third parties, say what kind of risk, the real-time risk that is there at this point of time. So it depends. Sometimes they're accurate, sometimes they are not. And then, of course, another part is third-party risk assessment cannot be cookie cutter. At the end of the day, it depends on the type of service that you're actually utilizing. Many third parties that we work with provide a lot of different kind of services. If we just look at do a third party assessment, which is a generic assessment that a lot of times people do, then we won't, it may not tie with the type of service that we are taking for them. So it has to be very specific to the type of service. It has to be very specific to the risk of the supplier to us. A high risk supplier has to go through a different kind of due diligence and something which is a low risk for us. So these are few of the things that we will have to definitely think about it when we're doing a due diligence of a third party.
Thank you. Let's see how many of you were listening it. So any one of you, you want to, or this is an open question. How many of you think in your respective organizations there is a near to perfect due diligence program for third parties from the security perspective? Any one organization, whomsoever you. Okay, how many feel you are doing something about it already? Okay, few hands. So rest are thinking or not able to do. What is the state? Because I think in all seriousness, it is very important, as we have been sharing our thoughts, that we are dependent on third parties and supply chains, right? And for carrying out the respective businesses and the production lines from OT side or a non-production or a normal enterprise business, third parties are equally big stakeholders like our internal teams or our internal technologies, right? So if we are not making them equally accountable from the legal standpoint or risk standpoint, and also not doing their regular audits / due diligence, I think it's us who are responsible, not they, to a certain extent, right? So those who didn't raise their hands probably should rethink what they are doing, or at least initiate something is what my recommendation would be, right? Okay, I think people are awake now, hopefully. Fine, we'll continue with our discussion. So I'll straight away go to you, Priyanka. Surprising one for you. So we have now DPDPA coming, and you spoke about certain regulatory issues. So from this topic perspective of supply chain, where third parties are kind of equal stakeholders in my understanding, how do you think it's going to impact in some sense? And we need to surely, like, it is a force to surely strengthen our supply chain is what my way of thinking is, but please expand.
Yes, so I would beg to differ on that point. They are not equal,
Okay.
you know, we
That's
are...
the difference between technologist and a lawyer.
No, so they are not equal. In fact, the onus is more on the primary organizations. So if you want to protect yourself, you know, from the liability, you have to ensure that you have proper mechanisms in place to ensure this due diligence is done. So it's not only due diligence of your third-party components, but also during the life cycle of software development, pre-post deployment. All of these things need to be factored in. The reason being, we also have privacy by design as a concept. Are we making sure? So there is one thing about data security being a part of our due diligence process. There is also a need to have privacy, like you mentioned, because the new law is also come in the DPDP Act. Privacy as a factor that we assess before we onboard any vendors who have access to personal data, because personal data breaches again have penalties that go up to as high as 250 crores. These are only the penalties. Forget about the litigations, the damages, the other costs that it may bring about. For say a B2B business, it could also be a reputational loss. There is a lot of loss of opportunity. All of these things need to be considered when you are looking at your vendors, not just from a security perspective, from a privacy perspective as well. Ensure that there is privacy by design in the third-party components that you take up. Specifically for supply chain automation, I think in very layman terms, why do we do automation? Is because we want to increase efficiency. and we want to be able to take better decisions. If there is a cyber threat, if there is data contamination, the primary reasons for which we are doing automation fail. So your automation has to be agile enough also to deal with these threats and to deal with the unexpected. If there is a change that needs to be undertaken to deal with the incidents or the threats, then we need to factor in all the possibilities which may range from, say, regulatory issues to your cost and everything. You know, when you transfer your existing supply chain, you change your existing supply chain to counteract the damage that any cyber threat may have caused. So these things need to be considered when you are looking at business continuity plans also. I think regulatory compliance is very often not regarded as much when cyber security is spoken about, but I think it is a very, very integral part of cyber security, because your spend on security, everything will depend on the risk, on the impact that this threat may have on your organization, which includes your compliance costs and all of these other costs as well.
No, thanks for bringing that point, Priyanka. In a personal view, I fully understand, and I think the only small point I would differ is that regulation and compliance should be a driving force, but shouldn't be the major force.
Yes.
The security has to be major force, and both have to be equally working together moving forward.
So security is the primary thing that needs to be done. But when you are looking at, I saw a lot of people did not raise their hands that we are not doing this. Perhaps because of budget constraints. There could be other reasons, bandwidth.
We Indians are shy. We Indians are shy actually to talk.
This is one of the things that you can tell your management, that these are the repercussions of not doing it.
Right.
So we can deal with it in a more holistic manner. We can look at security.
Sure. Thank you. So that brings me to another point, and the last point is you touched upon a bit of automation, and everyone nowadays is talking about only one thing, AI, right? Wherever we go, it is AI. We have been like humans have been so much in love with AI that everyone is fearing either that our jobs are lost, or everyone is saying, I don't know, so let me dwell into it, or let me read more. So do you think, Shaleen, to you, some bit of automation, because automation has its pros and cons, like she mentioned one, but there are others as well. There are goods and the bads of everything we do, and similarly there are goods and bads of AI. But can we bring the goods of AI into goods of automation and create something which is helpful to block these domino impact of a supply chain issue, let's say due to cyber attack? This is a surprise question, I always keep one. So
yes, I like surprises. So AI is the new buzzword, and I would say the word has been reformative. Technology has been there, especially in power sector, which is very real time. The power is something that you cannot store. You don't have a warehouse to store it. It is produced, it is transmitted, and it is circulated to the end user. So supply chain is very effective in this, and use of AI in the real-time data analysis, taking a corrective action and doing a predictive analysis is very important. So how much power does a city or maybe a distribution that area requires basically works on the predictive analysis. So power is something that, if I need 2,000 units, so you would not get it in round of units. Something you would get in, you need to have a long-term contracts and a medium and then maybe the deficit would be purchased in the short-term contracts, maybe a day at power. For example, it's a Sunday and it's a cricket match between India, Pakistan, and it's a summer season. Everybody would be glued to the TV with ACs on, and you would see a bit surge in the power. Comparative to a normal working day in the month of November, our people would be holidaying off, so there would be less power. So a good predictive model and a good corrective model can, the use of AI can be very helpful in that, number one. Number two is AI can also be very helpful in bringing up the reports in corrective technology, whereas we can remove the vulnerabilities of the product. We can identify that what would be the the shelf life or the vulnerabilities in that product, and how we can overcome that. So these are the two things which I believe is that something which would directly affect the supply chain in a power sector.
Well, I was thinking this was one panel discussion or one discussion which will not touch the topic of AI, but finally we went into it. So AI has been, let's say, I mean, this entire session of DSCI that we are having today, every session has talked about AI and how AI can be used or how AI needs to be protected from us in the cyber perspective. Since we are talking about specifically about supply chain over here, now AI of course is being used in supply chain. So as business, supply chain, there has been in demand generation, in planning, everything AI has been used. From a information security perspective, especially when we're talking about third parties, one area that I'm seeing AI being used nowadays is, I touched upon that a bit earlier, is predictive scoring. So lot of now there's a lot of data available for every organization out there. Some of it is proprietary data that organization, like for example, Cloudflare or CrowdStrike, they're all collecting that data from their different sources that they have. That's one area. Then there's other data which is publicly available data. And companies are now using a predictive scoring to say that, okay, this particular organization, this third party that you're using is a high risk or low risk, even without going and doing an assessment of them. So that's a lot of it is being driven by AI at this point of time. Of course, the question that still lies is how accurate that scoring is. In some cases, yes, it is maybe pretty accurate. In some cases, when you do a deep dive of it, you might see that that score versus what risk you are seeing is different. But yes, AI has entered the realm of supply chain security aspect also, apart from supply chain and information security in general.
So just to add on what I have said, smart meters being used in some of the cities or in smart cities is a real example of wherein how AI has been used, or how some part of AI has been plugged into those smart meters, where you get real-time charging, real-time data of real-time utilization of your supply. So that's a very good, a real-time example of AI usage.
Glad that we have started to adopt in the right ways, in the right areas. Before I close this, Priyanka, probably you would be aware about EU AI Act. Anything in few years down the line you see coming up in India from your whatever information you may have at this point in time?
So while we may not have an AI law yet, because to be honest, India is very different from the EU, also culturally. Privacy itself is something very new for us. We are at the cusp of innovation. I think the thought process that is there in the government right now, that is my understanding, is that we want to promote innovation. We want more adoption of AI and such other emerging technologies. So we may not see a law as such. There will be guidances, guidelines, best practices, which a lot of organizations will adopt. They will be based on similar principles that the EU AI Act is based on, everything related to transparency and explainability of your models. So essentially it has to be an ethical way in which AI is used, but these will be mostly self-regulated kind of guidelines. A lot of big companies will adopt it as a way to showcase that they are doing their best to their customers, especially ones that are in customer-facing kind of environments. So that's where we are. We will not be seeing any law anytime soon, for sure.
Okay, thanks for your inputs. So I think I'll sum it up. Hopefully you guys are still not bored. If already, then I'm sorry for that. But I think eventually supply chain is something most of the organizations is leveraging to make sure their businesses run as they want it to run. Of course, in the area of operational technologies is much more prevalent than any other areas. But somewhere or the other, we are dependent on supply chains from the enterprise perspective, and it is important that any impact due to a cyber attack has a potential to have a domino effect on our supply chain. So it is very important that we have the right kind of architecture in our environment, which takes care of all the aspects of minimum impact when there is any kind of cyber attack one, and ensure that we use more and more automation in the way where we can effectively utilize the data available to us. Use AI or not use AI, that is up to each one of you. But definitely AI gives a good view to how we can efficiently use certain technologies. And third parties are something which we are reliant on. We have to make sure they are equal stakeholders, and they give us the equal security posture as we expect from our internal environment. So having said that, I would like to thank you all the panelists for their views, and to each one of you for patient listening. If there are more questions, we are happy to take one or two. Thank you so much.
Just a quick one, just spoke of the entire domino effect. Why do you think there is a reticence from vendors to share, say, the software bill of materials or the AI bill of materials? How important is it? How can we utilize that in our due diligence program? And from a legal recourse perspective, how does that play to the advantage of the buyer and the subsequent risk management?
Can I take that? You want? So, software bill of materials is it's a statutory compliance initiated by CERT for critical sectors and for government agencies. Now, how important is that? It would help you to define the shelf life of the application. Sorry. Number two, integration. How and where you can integrate with the products. If the other products are evolving and developing with due course of time, what effect or impact would this product will have during the course of integration? Number three, there are a lot of cyber attacks which are evolving, So it is very important to know your solution so that you can patch it up. If the organization has to do a capacity management of the hardware, the application also has to evolve along with the hardware. So both go in tandem to each other. So it is always better, and and we have seen many organizations do not keep a record, or they have started evolving themselves as to doing a vulnerability check and security assessment of this application. But I think this is of the utmost important, wherein maybe any application, be it consumer side or internally or maybe critical, should not go live without security assessment. Or even if not even internally, even if you're purchasing a product, should undergo, or maybe you should ask the vendor whether a security assessment has been carried out of this product or not. So it is better to ask questions. Time has come that we should ask questions to the vendors and suppliers, and it should be a part of the contract.
Just that it's not easy. They don't disclose these tests. That's the point.
So that is why you can refer to this cert, and that is why you can take this. You can take a help of the security of statutory compliance.
Yeah, I mean, regulations have S-bombs wherever it has worked. Not why only S-bombs, H-bombs also. Hardware bill of materials, especially when we are talking about IoT, right? It is something that only places where it has been successful is where a regulation has forced them. Think about medical devices in US or EU. So those cases it worked because regulations required that S-bomb or H-bomb needs to be disclosed. Otherwise, no supplier is going to share it on their own. If you have if it's a single source supplier that you have a lot of power on it, yes, you could ask for it. But otherwise, I don't see that happening. From a legal perspective, is there anything?
Yeah, I think it rightly said it depends upon your negotiating power. But these are things that should have been part of best practices anyways, because if you have to comply with a certain regulatory requirement, you need to know what you have. So the regulation is now telling you take these disclosures from your vendor so you know what you have and what you need to do. So I think that is a way of the regulators actually telling you, giving you everything, spoon feeding everything to the organization, that you need to have this information with you and then proceed accordingly.
Can't put this into contracts to make sure that they are forced to give that information?
Yes, so again, it comes back to negotiating power. So if you have the negotiating power, then you put it in the contract. Otherwise, a lot of companies don't accept it at all. Even for that matter, you talk about now the privacy laws and all of that. A lot of companies that we see are reluctant to, even today. The law is there in place, but because there is no effective date, a lot of companies are reluctant to accept those obligations. So unless there is a stamp from the regulation, it becomes difficult.
So before contracting, it should be part of RFP as well.
Yes.
So companies, when they start when they have to comply to the RFP or they have to respond, they should ensure that you have to ensure that yes, they answer that yes, they are supplying software bill of materials. Contracting can be done as a follow up for that. So.
Okay, thank you. Any more questions?